Right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's my pleasure to call the Distressed Unit Appeal Board meeting for April 26th to order. My name is Justin McAdam. I am the chair of the Distressed Unit Appeal Board. Happy to be here today. We have a number of items on our agenda that we will take in due course. As has been our custom, we will take public comment. We do have a few people who have signed up here. If you do wish to provide public comment either electronically or in person, please let us know before we get to that. Before we jump to public comment, we will start with the approval of the minutes. We have two items of minutes to approve. We have the March 28th, 2022 public meeting minutes and our April 21st, 2022 executive session minutes. Those were circulated in advance of the meeting. Does anyone have any corrections or changes that need to be made to those minutes?
Our consensually distinguished, internationally renowned institution of higher learning, the Theodore Roosevelt High School of Gary, Indiana, speaking on behalf of students, taxpayers, stakeholders, Garyites, who believe all students in Gary should receive the highest quality and equitable education. MGT's 5-year presence and management of the Gary school system continues to reek of failure, falsehood, and financial finagling. The 2017 graduation level was 89.6%. The 2022 graduation percentage is 68.7%. Students fail, graduation rate continues to drop. iRead scores plummet, math, reading, English scores plummet. Dropout rates increase. Regard for parents, teachers, and students is demeaning and disrespectful. Refurbished seats and repurposed roofs don't measure up with the millions of dollars and the worth of the Gary school structures. Westside Leadership Leadership Academy should have a new roof by now, not repurposed. The Westside Leadership Academy is the site of the 1972 National Black Political Convention, which was spearheaded by the late great Mayor Richard Gordon Hatchett. Such a building will eventually, hopefully, become a historical landmark. Therefore, refurbished, repurposed are terms that do not complement such a historical site. The Westside was built in 1968 with 3,000 students. And Roosevelt High School was built in 1929, opening with 3,000 students. Check the value, respect the value of Gary citizens and structures and school system. We want you to pay more attention and give intentional regard to the non-English speaking students of our schools, the special education students, the physically and emotionally challenged students. MGT has got to go. It's time for you to remove the biased handling of our Gary schools. DUAB, it's up to you to make the change and make the move. We've got to do better, and we can do better without MGT. So they've got to go. There's a rich, bold, vibrant, colorful paintings throughout the cover, the exterior of the Westside High School Leadership Academy. But there's poor, dull-minded, wasteful, lifeless, ineffective goings on the inside of the building. It's like giving a child a $300 pair of shoes, but never teaching the child how to tie the shoes. MGT has had a vessel of brilliant minds to mold, nurture, and transform into a great, long-lasting, widespreading, life-promoting asset on a global plane. But MGT doesn't appreciate the responsibility that it has been given and fails to see and enhance the potential of the students that have been placed in MG's care. $72.1 million in referendum money. Where is it? How is it being used? How is it being spent? Where are the ambassadors that are supposed to be presenting reports for the monies that have been gained through the referendum at the expense of the taxpayers of Gary, Indiana? Where are the other monies that MGT is responsible for handling? Who are the contractors for the projects? Is MGT hiring companies who hire workers? Pardon me?
Just letting you know in 3 minutes. Yes.
Thank you. Is MGT hiring companies who hire workers that look like the majority of the people that are in the city of Gary and the majority of the students in the school system that MGT manages? We want you to stop the nepotism, stop the prison pipeline pattern being followed by MGT. We want you to stop settling for the low, least, and last in performance of grades and rankings. We want MGT to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tiffany.
Mrs. Taylor.
Mrs. Tiffany. Up next, we have Kendra Johnson. Good afternoon, Ms. Johnson.
Good afternoon to each and every one of you. My name is Kendra S. Johnson, and I have 25 plus years as a parent in the Gary Community School Corporation. My oldest child is 37 years old, and my youngest child will be 21 in September. And my youngest child was the only son that graduated out of the Gary Community School Corporation. As an advocate for low-income parents, we say Title I, but once a school has been designated Title I school, we consider all parents, no matter what their income level, Title I parents. So therefore, I have to say I have to say low-income parents. I am deeply sad that in order to get the deficit corrected, the academics of our children had to suffer. Before the state takeover, I don't recall all of our schools receiving an F grading. After the state takeover, all of our schools received an F grade grading. I tried to be as involved as I possibly could before COVID hit. But after COVID hit, it became sort of a door slam. And I understand that we were looking out for the welfare and safety of the employees, the students, and all those involved. But it unfortunately shut out many of the parents from being involved. And according to Title I federal law, parents must be, not can be, not possibly, must be involved in the decision making involving the education of their children. You may have gotten the deficit down, but at what cost? How much will it cost the students? And I'm not talking about your valedictorian or your higher ranking students, grade ranking students. I'm talking about those students that had to struggle. Where are they at now? What are they doing? That was something I always tried to put to the Gary Community School Corporation before the state takeover and even now. Who is keeping track of how well our students are doing now that they have received their certificate of attendance, their high school diploma, or had to get GEDs instead? Where's that data? Where's that tracking? I want you to consider that before making any more decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Up next, we have Ms. Lenita Dunham. Good afternoon.
In a long 5 years. I think I've been here for the whole ride.
Glad to have you.
And Mr. Bennett, and I don't know who else was here when we first got taken over. But anyway, I'm here today to speak on behalf of Bethune Childhood Development Center. We have a new principal at Bethune. Her name is Erica Glenn. She was hired last year. She came from East Chicago. The teachers and parents spent last year trying to work with the new principal. Bethune has been a star school for decades. I know because I'm a 31-year veteran kindergarten teacher in the Gary schools. I received those students, and they have always been well prepared. I will read parts of a letter that came from 18 teachers from the Bethune staff last year, addressed to Ms. Glenn. Ms. Glenn, the staff at Bethune Early Childhood is eager to partner with you in providing our students with a high-quality preschool education. Our goal is to keep the lines of communication open and truly work for the betterment of our school. We as certified staff have several concerns which we feel need to be addressed. Please read and reflect on these issues so that we can create a work environment that best results in all involved. So it talks about addressing feedback from those concerned. The amount of frequency of testing is excessive. We're doing big day testing, unit testing, report cards. The assessment practices are not age appropriate or necessary to inform instruction. Students have been identified as having severe special needs. They're placed in regular general education classes. Many of the students from what have been observed during class sessions will clearly be unable to function in regular ed classes. These are some of the concerns, and it has all the teachers signed on here, their names that was presented to Ms. Glenn at the beginning of last year. And so after this letter was drafted, we called a meeting with Dr. McNulty and asked, could she meet with the staff? And she said she could meet with 3 or 4 of them. So I brought, and I'm rushing this, but it's a lot to say. We brought 9 or 10. And so they addressed their concerns to Dr. McNulty, and her response was, the rumor is that you want Ms. Glenn fired, and that's not about to happen. And so my response to her was, so all of this that we're trying to share with you, because we want to work with you, is that we're trying to get her fired. Nobody's trying to get her fired. I went to Ms. Glenn personally and asked her what was her philosophy on early childhood, because the teachers were telling me what was going on. She sent me a packet with 200 sheets of paper telling me this was her philosophy and this is how she was going to run her school. I was trying to help her because I am a kindergarten teacher of 31 years. And so after that, Ms. Glenn, she continued to not let the teachers have a voice. And so now, when we came back this year, she had the teachers washing linen and drying linen. She had cots in the schools where they never had rest periods before, 20-pound cots that the teachers have to lift and have to clean. And so we got that taken care of. So right now we're dealing with eating breakfast in the classroom, lunch in the classroom. So on my phone now I have pictures of mice droppings and mice that are in the class because Ms. Glenn wants them to eat in the classroom, which there's a big cafeteria. There's been 6 departures from that school this school year. Mr. Joyce, I remember 4 years ago. Okay, 4 years ago, you said on the stage at West Side, and you said that Gary Community Schools needed to do exit surveys, and you suggested that, but they have not been done. 6 teachers have left Bethune School, 2 by heart attacks, 2 by resignation, 1 by termination, and 1 by retirement because her doctor suggested it. And so as a result of all of this, they sent out a job description on last week, and on the job description, it says you have to, for certified teachers, all other duties assigned by the building principal. And they have a 52-page agreement from the Indiana Department of Education where we get evaluated, and it tells us what our job is. And so I'm going to walk away from this now. But I talked to Mr. McAdams, and the only reason I'm bringing this to your attention is because you told me that there were some gray areas in the contract where you could say some things to the Cary Community School Corporation administration that could help things get better. Because I did ask what was the role of DUAB, because I was very concerned after Representative Thompson co-author 1187 and do away with collective bargaining. So I was trying to figure out what was DUAB's role. So now we are picketing
Ms. Dunham, if you could please.
Bethune Early
comments,
Childhood.
thank you.
Okay, why are we picketing? We are picketing because this is a cry for help. We need our voices heard, and we have a required.
Thank
Please
you,
call
Ms.
Mr. McAdams.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, up next, joining us via the internet, we have Ms. Renee Connolly.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Ms. Connolly, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Ms. Connolly? All right, we're going to move to Mr. Dwight Gardner, who is signed up, and Ms. Connolly, we'll try to come back to you one more time after Mr. Gardner.
Oh, can you hear me?
We can hear you now. Please go ahead.
Okay. My name is Dwight Gardner. I'm the pastor of the Trinity Baptist Church of Gary, Indiana. I have 3 children, all of whom are graduates of the Gary Community School Corporation, and including one who now holds a PhD in education from the University of Maryland. All of my children were raised in the Gary Community School Corporation. And there are several things. I worked hard. I promoted the referendum. I believe in its related accomplishments. One of the results was most recently Gary Westside High School held the first track meet in 13 years on a brand new facility, had 5 schools there, and it was such a success that community volunteers came out. Uh, uh, Academic and athletic legends in the city came out to help, and now that facility is being considered as a possible place to hold the conference championships. That was a win. That was a win. We do have some tremendous issues in public education in the city of Gary. But they didn't start yesterday. They didn't start 3 years ago. They didn't start 5 years ago. 10 years before the Gary Community School Corporation was taken over by the state, it was number 289 out of 289 in the state. And even with the Emerson program and the Banneker program. And so, you know, we have to be honest about where we are. There are real concerns. I thought Ms. Dunham's concern for the early learning program was right on point. Lot needs to be done there, but I am convinced that we cannot do it alone. That we need the state at the table, but we also need the state to recognize that the citizens must have a voice and must be included in the decision making. And my hope is that we can move forward together for the betterment of our students. I think it is imperative. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Gardner. Up next, we have Ms. Kim Robinson.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm Calumet Township Trustee Kimberly Robinson. As I serve as an official here in the city of Gary, I was happy and overwhelmingly happy when the referendum was passed and to help in getting it passed. I am a product of Gary Community Schools myself, and my son more recently in 2016 from Westside Leadership Academy. So I know the importance of all the great things that the referendum had provided with the improvements, and so much so that my son is ready to come home and do his part. And so I just wanted to lend support and let you guys know that as a Calumet Township trustee, I am a community partner that Gary Community Schools can consider whenever they are in need of any supportive services that we provide through our office.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. We appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your work and service.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Up next, we have Ms. Nina Burton. Ms. Burton, can you hear us? Ms. Burton?
My apologies, I can hear you fine. Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. Hi, my name is Nina Burton, lifelong Gary resident, mother of 4 presently attending Gary Westside High School, Gary Middle School, and Banneker Elementary. We are happy to see improvements coming, looking for more progress to continue. And as Pastor Gardner has said, looking for the state not only to contribute as in taking over the school system, but making sure that the state is at the table as well to help us to continue with the return to local control and making sure that is a successful endeavor. So we are pleased with some of the improvements. Yes, we do want to see local control return and reinstated as we can govern our own community as competent people. And we do appreciate this time to speak.
Thank you, Ms. Burton. Up next, we'll move back to Ms. Renee Connolly and see if we're able to hear her this time. Just one moment, Ms. Connolly. All right, I think Ms. Connolly has disconnected. That concludes the public comment. Appreciate everyone for taking the time to share with us today.
Mr. Chairman, if I may. The legislature passed a bill during this year's session that dealt with school boards and the public having a right to speak. And I'm not sure if this board is in agreement to abiding by the provisions of that bill. The bill, if my colleagues can correct me, the bill indicated that citizens would have the right to speak on each topic that's on the agenda when the topic is being discussed before decisions are made, versus what we're doing here, because a lot of school boards were either not allowing citizens to speak or allowing them to speak at the beginning or at the end, and was not necessarily applicable to the topics that were on the agenda. And I just want to know, what is your sentiment on abiding by the provisions of that bill, since in actuality, this board is the Gary Community School Board of Directors for Executive Board, the Board of Directors.
Well, Representative Smith, I appreciate you bringing that up. I don't have a position on that today. I think that's something we ought to discuss in the intervening time, and happy to take a look at that and talk with you about how to approach that issue.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Up next, we have our manager update. Dr. McNulty is here to provide that.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody.
Good
Good to
afternoon.
see you all again. I had a lengthy update just a few weeks ago, so today's a little bit briefer, more brief, but I wanted to share with you several things that have happened in the last couple of weeks. Wanted to tell you, as you've heard from some of our community partners, that we had a great event that happened at the St. Maria Church in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King Day that had been postponed due to COVID. Our ROTC program posted the colors, the high school choir sang, many students won, all of our students won the essay contest and won money towards college and tablets. It was a great community effort, and it was a wonderful event. It was very well done. We do have graduation planned for Sunday, June 5th, again with one of our community partners, and that's at the Railcats. That's going to be held at 4 o'clock. So if you happen to be in town, we would love to have you come and watch our students walk across the stage. We also had another wonderful performance from our Fine Arts Department of fences here in the last couple of weeks. We are hosting another one in May called Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat that was also postponed during COVID. So if you would like to come, we would love to have you in attendance. Those are also all taped, so if you want to watch them online, you can do that as well. Our principals and administrative team have been attending job fairs across the state of Indiana and Illinois, trying to recruit teachers, social workers, all of our open positions. We've attended 13 so far. We had our first job fair that we hosted at Westside this past Saturday, which was over 700 participants showed up. We had 26 vendors in participation along with ourselves. We did hire 7 teachers that day, with many more that we are interviewing here in the next couple of weeks. So that was a good success for us. On April 28th, we are holding the community event at Lou Wallace, where we'll be giving out bricks. And I think I did announce that we found a time capsule under the building that the demo people did when they were tearing down the building. So we will be having the alumni there and anybody from the community that wants to come, so that we can open the time capsule and see what's in it and celebrate all the good memories of the rich history of Lou Wallace. And just to put a pin on what was said earlier, we did have our very first track meet in 13 years at our home track event. It was awesome. We also had our very first unified track team that was put together and had their track event at our school as well. So that was, I think, a huge celebration for our school district. And please take note that the dashboard is in your packet and it's also posted on the website so that you can review that anytime. So I'll take any questions if you have any at this time.
Questions for Dr. McNulty? Well,
I just have, how many graduates are you going to have this year?
About 200.
200, and what have you had in the past, like last year?
About the same.
About the same?
Yeah.
Okay. And then I just had one, how many openings do you have?
Currently?
How many?
Currently, are you asking about? It fluctuates. We fluctuate anywhere from 7 to 12 at any given time. We had 45 a year and a half ago.
Wow.
So we partnered with IUN University. They've been a great partnership, and that's where we're paying people to get their teaching licenses. And so that's helped fill most of those positions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Great. Dr. Smith?
Yes, couple of questions. What is the status of the Gary Education Foundation?
I know that Ms. Bonita Dunham is on that board, if you'd like to speak with that, about that. What's the question specifically?
Yes, are you advertising scholarships? Because it seems like people are questioning that and don't seem to know the status of the Gary Education Fund.
Definitely. I've attended several of those meetings, and then any scholarships that are available, we certainly post out for our students. We've had many students apply. I know we had almost our entire basketball team last year running for scholarships.
How is the work got spread for the students? How are they informed of the scholarship opportunity?
We post them in the guidance counselors' offices, and the students go down and meet with their guidance counselors. We also pass them out at lunchtime. We have, I don't know, 20, 30 more students this year that got scholarships than last year. So I know that the word's getting out there.
I had mentioned to you, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I had mentioned to you previously that alumni coming to me because they know we did the bricks for the demolition of Grable School. How should one of the alumnus contact you, or how do we get the bricks prepared? Because what we did before was half of the money went for preparation of bricks, we still the bricks, and we put a plate on it with a picture of the school. And the profit came up that went to the Education Foundation. That's why I was asking the questions about the foundation.
Chelsea.
How do we initiate it?
Chelsea's handling that. So I can make sure that afterwards that you and I talk with her so we can move forward. Also want to mention, Dr. Smith, that IUN is placing an office within Westside next week, and they're going to start staffing that with a staff person 2 days a week so that they can work with students on scholarship opportunities, FAFSA forms, those types of things.
And the community continues to think that the ambassadors for project is not working. As we said before, we feel that the number is reduced. What we said when we were championing the cause for the referendum was that there would be a small group of people who would come back and report to the community that is not happening. Would you visit that to see if we can make the community more satisfied with the ambassadors?
I'd be happy to have a conversation with you about that.
Thank you.
All right, are there other questions for Dr. McNulty? Comments?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, please.
In your frequently asked questions, Dr. Knoll, you talked about the mental health, some of the things you're dealing with mental health. Could you go into a little bit more detail about that social emotional learning and what the district is actively doing and where you're at with hiring a staff? Thank you.
Yeah, if you don't mind, Mr. Bennett, I'll respond to that one. So we're actually doing several things. One, we are initiating this project called City Connects with Marian University. We have committed to adding one more counselor or social worker at each of the elementaries. To date, we've filled 3 of those 5, and hopefully we'll be filling the 4th here soon. And then in terms of older grades, we've done this training called mindfulness that really is helping kids regulate their emotions so that they handle when they get angry in different ways. But we know that that's not enough for all children. And so I actually have a contract right now. We've issued a contract with Edgewater Mental Health, which is one of our local mental health facilities in Gary. And they see some of our children on site. They come to us so that they don't miss class and parents don't have to have the transportation. But they've only had so much capacity too. So I have another entity that I'm getting very close to finalizing a contract with them so that we'll have more on-site mental health therapists for our kids that really have the most tremendous need. Now, at a universal level, we have a core team of people that have been working on, what is it that all of us can do to support all kids being welcomed and feel safe and feel that they can go to any adult in the building when they have an issue. Because for a lot of our kids, that safe adult isn't necessarily the counselor. It might honestly be the janitor, the cafeteria worker, a principal, and so on. So that we know that we got to treat everybody. So we have a core curriculum that we've purchased, and then we're looking at, is that enough, and want more training? And then pretty here soon in May, we're having Dr. Lori Desenthal out of Butler. She's training the entire district regarding mental health and how can we as a team support our kids. So we know not one way is going to address it. So that's why we've said, how many different ways can we? So it's a comprehensive approach.
Is there any way to include parents, other family members? And I know that the county also has resources, or at least monetary resources. I'm not sure exactly what Lake County does with those resources, but is there any way to coordinate that for family members, or for parents, aunts, uncles, so forth?
Yeah, a lot of when you start getting into recurring services, we have to have parent permission anyways. So they have been important for that. And then actually, we've just had a social emotional learning night for our families. And we're planning more because we know families need to learn how to do, the strategies that we're teaching our kids and our teachers actually are helpful with families at home. I've used it on my own children. I'm taking the byproducts of what we've learned. So we do agree families are an important part of that and want to involve them too.
Good. Can you speak to maybe some early numbers or early indications of your participation for summer school? I see where you're expanding that, and I think that's going to be needed. And do you have any early indications of attendance at summer school?
I know last summer was our largest summer school attendance, so it's open right now, and we've been blasting it out to all of our parents, and strongly.
Still early, right?
Still early, strongly encouraging them. The numbers are swelling, so as the students are signing up, then we know how much staff to hire, but we don't have a firm number yet. But last year, it was our largest.
Do you have an indication, Dr. McNulty, as far as pace that you're on compared to last year at this time?
Well, do you know?
No, I would say it's about the same.
About the same?
Yeah,
Okay.
not a little bit more, but we're offering it to kindergarten through 12th grade.
Okay, great.
Do you encourage certain students to go there? But you don't mandate, I assume.
It's not mandated, but it is encouraged.
Strongly encouraged.
Yeah, I believe the teachers and principals were tasked with targeting the 30 neediest kids at each grade level in each building. And we're first prioritizing them.
Okay.
And then if we still have space or parents that turn us down, then we'll proceed from there. But yeah, we do have plans for a robust summer school again.
And is
Focusing
media,
on STEM and
yeah, what about reading? Where does that fit into the equation?
reading,
The elementary
reading and math. With a STEM focus, though, so it's project-based.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question about summer school. I heard you say that it's not mandatory, it's voluntary, requiring parents to participate in. At one point, it was tied to retention. It's not, is it no longer tied to retention? So what about those students who really need it? They're in between grades. You don't make it mandatory for promotion.
No, so that hasn't happened in a long time, but we strongly encourage those kids.
We want to go back and look at that.
Yeah.
Because I don't think we're doing children justice by passing them. I think you harm them.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword, because then you end up with a 14-year-old that's in sixth grade.
Well, I mean, in your system, retention is cycled out. They didn't just keep you in kindergarten forever. But you just don't keep passing the system because that's going to lead to more certificates of graduation rather than diplomas.
On that note, if you find a student that really should be held back, can parents say, do they have the final say and say, no, I don't want that child held back? Or is it entirely up to you to make that decision?
It's a team decision, we meet with the team.
Okay.
Case
But
by
does
case.
the parent have to approve that?
We've never had a situation, at least since I've been there, where we mandate that. We really try to make it a team decision.
Okay.
Because if they don't have buy-in, it's.
Right,
Yeah.
right, yeah, okay.
Let me just say about the past, and it worked for us. We certainly consulted with the parent and tried to get their approval. But there were times that we made it mandatory in those cases. The child's retained, they had the alternative use of remediation program or retention. And Gary, in his past, had a very successful food corporation. We were studied by many communities that came in, many cities, and the corporations that came into state. I don't know exactly when the deterioration began, but it did begin, and so far we were the shining star of Northwest Indiana anymore. I get that. And that brings me to the point that Reverend Garner spoke on about district ranking. Yes, we were ranked in the bottom, but there's a difference between the ranking and some people know better can correct me. The ranking of a district versus the schools. Our district was at the bottom. We had A schools, we had B schools, we had C schools, we had D schools. Now we have all Fs. So there's a difference between how they determine with a district versus the school grading.
Well, I understand that, but I also respectfully disagree. We don't have all F schools.
You don't?
We do.
What do we have? Because the community seems to understand now.
Well, West Side's a B.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't have the oral estimate in front of me, but I know that West Side for sure is a B.
Well, that's good news. And I think I knew that.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, several of our schools are not even ranked in the lowest
Right.
support category for the state that they put out. So we do believe we're making progress, and that shows.
Well, may I suggest, and I know Chelsea does a good job of putting publicity, that maybe we want to put that on the website so people can see.
Sure.
I think we put it on the outside of the building in a big letter that says B.
I agree with that, and that was done under the last administration prior to the rankings and improvement. I think there's still some signage up now. It's outdated.
Yes.
That might be something to consider updating us on more fully at the next meeting.
Be happy to.
To think about how we can.
Thank you for your.
All right. Our next item of business is the School Improvement Fund and the 1065 docket. Roll, you want to take it away?
So included in your packet today is the February and March claims. A little over $1 million, so $1,197,421.30 is what you'll be approving today. We've continued to make some HVAC and plumbing upgrades, and as we switch gears here with the weather changing, making sure that we're ready to switch gears into cold weather to warm weather, as well as some payouts for our demolition for the Wallace, and then the turf as well, which will start this week, hopefully. So it'll be ready to go for next fall. So we've got a lot of movement still going on as we come together with our plan for continuing renovations this month.
Great. That docket was included in the packet. Are there any questions or comments on the items included? All right, this is an item we do need to take a vote on to approve. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we approve the School Improvement Fund 1065 claims as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion on the motion? All right. Steve, would you call the roll?
Mr. Bennett?
Yes.
Mr. Schwartz?
Yes.
Ms. Kabaki?
Yes.
Oh, Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Senator Brown and Chairman McCott?
Yes. Our next item of business, again, another follow-up item from our last meeting, the bond refinancing. This was presented to us, but we are taking another step to be able to be prepared.
Yes.
Nicole, do you want to present that?
Absolutely. So this is a resolution to approve the issuance of the refunding for the bonds. This is just another step in the process. So when the market hopefully picks back up and we can capture that savings, we'll have all of our ducks in a row and all the legal formalities done. Bond counsel is optimistic that hopefully we can kind of find a window that will capture an adequate savings. If not, then we'll wait, obviously. We want to make sure it's the best interest of the school corporation. So we're just making sure that everything's in order.
With the interest rates where they are now, does that eliminate any possibility of real savings at this point?
There is still a savings. On Monday, I received some updated numbers. We were looking at approximately a 20,000 annual savings. So not ideal compared to where we were in January, but hopefully if the market changes and those numbers fluctuate, we can capture larger savings.
So this resolution would just authorize you to move forward with that at an appropriate time. Is that correct? Any questions regarding the resolution or this item? All right, I'm going to entertain a motion. Is there a motion?
A motion that we approve the resolution as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
And a second, any discussion on the motion? All right, Steve, would you call the roll?
Mr. Bennett?
Yes.
Mr. Schwartz?
Yes.
Ms. Kabaki?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Chairman McCott?
Yes.
Five, sir.
Next, we have an update on a discussion that arose during our last meeting regarding the formative assessments, the iReady testing that the district does internally. Representative Smith had raised some concerns regarding some comments he had heard about irregularities in the testing process. And so, as we promised, the district has looked into that and has an update for us.
Yeah, so we looked at it thoroughly, as well as the company that, the iReady's company, and had them also do a forensic audit of it as well. And Ms. Bradley has a report that she'd like to share.
So I think it's important to note that we take the claim very seriously and considering everything that's happened in the past. And so we, of course, want student improvement. We want to do so in a way, and we do all of our testing with integrity. So we did reach out to the vendor and spoke to them, had them look at the data that was from the last test, the first and second test. And what they said, and this is a quote, that there was nothing nefarious found on their end as it related to these scores. The issue included 50 students, both at the middle schools, whose teachers gave inaccurate directions and resulted in retests. They were never directed by admin to do so. And since then, we've talked to the administrators at both schools and the instructional coach at Bailey. and also any of the teachers that may have gotten the information wrong and allow students to take retests when they shouldn't have. And that is the extent of the investigation. I believe that you also took a look at.
Well, let me, Pete also had an opportunity to evaluate the data as well and look at the report from the testing company. And so I'll give him an opportunity to provide his observations.
So I did do a separate analysis, which was consistent with what the vendor had shared. Out of over 2,400 tests, there were on the English side 34, on the math side 38, where within the same window zone the student retook. It is not in all cases that's okay. In many cases, it's appropriate for someone to take it on a limited basis, and that's only about 1.5%. So that would be within what would be acceptable. There was the one school, the one grade where there was a bit of a bump, and that was explained just not understanding when a teacher is empowered to grade that second test. But overall, there was nothing widespread. There was nothing to suggest anything toward. In fact, I was able to kind of tag the ones, that 1.5%, and remove them from analysis, and didn't see any typically significant change in results. It did not impact either the math or English.
May I ask a question, Mr. Gray?
You may.
Okay. What quantity of students did you say that was retested?
It was
He
about
must
50.
misunderstand.
It was the 30, whatever,
I thought
ELA.
I heard you say 50.
I did, yeah.
Oh.
It was total with both schools,
Both schools, when you say both schools, what are you talking about?
both middle schools. Yeah.
So the problems occurred in middle schools? Yeah. Okay, and did you talk with any of the teachers to find out about their view of what was done? Or did you just have that outside analysis?
We did the outside analysis. We had the company look at the data and also talk to the principal and the coaches who assist with the testing to find out what the situation was, and then to make certain that this, for our final formative assessment, was clear.
And the principal and the instructional coach spoke with those teachers.
They spoke with the teachers. And did they get to the source of why there was such widespread misunderstanding? Because I'm not saying widespread because it was at two particular schools that they did not understand the directions.
I think that was the extent of it, though.
And it wasn't the whole school, it was two schools, it was a couple of teachers.
And I think I heard you say you discussed it with the leadership of the schools and
That's
of
correct.
course teachers to clarify those policies going forward about how it handled testing in the future. Testing. That's correct.
So we should get better. We should not have resets like we had.
Well, there may be retests because that is what happens. So if a student takes only a couple of minutes on the test, it does reset them. So that occurred as well. So that may be the case. In these instances, it wasn't necessarily a red flag that caused that. It may have been that the student was out and I thought this kid didn't take the test and they took it again. It wasn't anything of it.
I want to thank you for following through with us. I'll report it back to the community, to those teachers. Would I be asking too much if you said that they reported to you? Did they report to you in writing of their findings?
The company?
Yes.
Yeah, I have an email.
Would I be privy to that to give to those people who have complained to me?
I'd be happy to get it to you.
Okay, thanks.
Are there other questions? Mr. Bennett?
I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I'm clear. There were two schools involved and one teacher in each school. And the total aggregate retests were under 2% of the total
That's
amount.
correct. That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments regarding this item? All right. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate you following up on that. Mr. Miller, appreciate your follow-up on that as well. Up next, we have an update from Mr. Miller regarding the contract authorization, a contract that he's authorized in the interim between our meetings. Mr. Miller?
So there was one purchase, which the school district presented at the last meeting, and that should be in your files over there to review with LSI Learning Services, or Learning Sciences International, who would propose to do a needs assessment. School district actually applied for a school improvement grant through the Department of Education. I've not yet heard back whether they're going to be worth it or not. So there's actually 8 schools which would be going through the assessment. Costs $25,000 per school. There's actually 5 schools. We talked before about whether some schools qualify for this and some don't. So there's 5 schools that would be eligible. So if they're successful, 125 would come from that SIG grant and 75 would come from ESSER 3. If they are not successful, then the proposal is to have all of those come from ESSER 3, which was there were sufficient funds at the point that we approved at the last meeting. So that was the one contract that I took with last meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to look lost. What is this contract for? What is it doing? I see needs assessment.
I'm gonna kick it to Nathan to speak to it in more depth.
Yeah, Representative Smith, yeah, I can answer that. So it is tied to a school improvement grant, which the federal government puts out. It flows to Indiana, that schools are eligible. So you heard me earlier say, not all 8 of our schools are even eligible for school improvement funds because 3 of our schools are deemed as not as needy, which means that their performance is a little higher. So, however, as you heard, we are interested in growth across the board. We always believe that we can always improve what we're doing. So it's really just an evaluation of where we are with teaching and learning. So some third-party set of eyes that are going to observe some teaching, listen to stakeholders and help us drive improvement forward.
So it's a program just assessment or it's not an improvement program?
This portion is just an assessment of where we are. So to get a baseline, again, we've gone through multiple years of the pandemic. We've gone through lots of changes with that. And so we want to make sure that we have a good evaluation, a good diagnostic of where we are.
Mr. Chairman, you have shared with me, and I guess either the 1-to-2 ratio or 1-to-1 ratio that MGT was bringing somebody in to work with them on school improvement. What is the status of that?
Mr. Parrish, can you speak to that?
Yes. We are finishing what we labeled as phase 2 of a turnaround. Phase 1 was the first 3 years. Phase 2 was the 2 years ending June 30th. Each phase has a unique set of needs and a unique configuration of the team. And if given the opportunity to finish the work, a proposed phase 3 would include a reconfiguration of the team with roles and responsibilities to meet the needs of that specific phase.
So you're looking for an additional contract in order to be able to provide phase 3, is what you're saying?
I did not say that.
What is going to happen? You said you're looking beyond phase 3.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
You haven't begun phase 3 yet.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so you're doing that volunteer basis, and you're looking for a contract for phase 3.
Well, to answer your question specifically, we would not volunteer, if that's the question.
I think what I hear, I think Representative Smith is asking, and I think drawing on some discussions that we've had. This phase 3 idea is something that you're laying out. There's a number of things maybe that you would want to approach there. But if I understand it, you've already made a concerted push on academics, and there's an individual that you've engaged who's part of your team that you've already begun to engage in the district to evaluate and look at and become involved in the really this push on the academic front.
Much
So
like
maybe you could speak to that.
Much like NGT does, as they have done for the last 4 or 5 years, they bring in resources along the way to help with our financial situation. We've got Ricardo, we've got lots of people, so we're looking at adding extra academic supports as we move through our work together.
I'm curious how the LSI contract connects with a school improvement grant to the question on the.
Well, I'm looking at a holistic viewpoint of school improvement. Assessment is where you've been, where you are. And that becomes a basis for planning where you want to go and how you're going to get there. Those are the layman's definition of those two terms. So assessment is not an end in itself. It's a means to end. And so I'm saying that they are highly connected.
I believe this assessment is part of a multi-phase strategy, if I understood it. That you contemplate additional engagement following this based on what you learned. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. So if we are successful with the school improvement grant, which it's really, we're trying to fulfill conditions that the state has laid out. As you heard Pastor Gardner say, we are 289. So we know we want to move forward as a team. And so if we're successful with this first round, it will open up additional dollars. And those additional dollars will be used based upon, an assessment in our current academic plan that the board approved last month. So we're now trying to move forward, and we want to use those dollars, if successful, in the most efficient way possible, and the ESSER dollars that you all have already approved, so that we can say we put it in the best and highest use, and we're going to see achievement increase. So when you're talking about turning around student performance and hitting academics hard, we do believe there will be immediate improvement, but it also is going to be long-term improvement. You have to play the short game and the long game. And that's the intent. We got to start somewhere. Let's see where we are.
Mr. Chairman, at the beginning of this phase 2 contract, I expressed my concern about the academic achievement. I think maybe Mr. Joyce and Mr. Bennett joined me in that. I'm suggesting before we go to phase 3 and then requesting the contract, they don't want to come out and say that, but I think it's implied that we have a report on those benchmarks that they were supposed to complete on phase 2. I think our community deserves to hear the report on that, since that was an answer to their concern 2 years ago. Secondly, I would hope that before MGT's contract is renewed, that a hearing will be held in Gary so people can express their views about the academic achievement. They're given their platitudes that they lauded for what they've been able to do, remove the politics out of downsizing so that we can get back in financial standing. But this community is highly sensed about the academic achievement of our students in our community. And they feel like our children are being used as pawns, as puppets, as a cash cow. And all I'm saying is that's the view, and all you have to do is listen to all the talk shows that's going on in the morning, in the night. And if you go and you're confronted by people like I am, I'm in my community, and I can tell you almost every time I go into a grocery store, if we only have one in Gary, there's large enough. Or if I'm out in America, people are stopping me with these questions. I don't know if it gets any more since I don't do it for it, but I get them. And God is my witness, and I know He hears me now, that I'm not giving you lies.
And I appreciate that. And Representative Smith, I want to come back to that conversation. I don't want to get too far away from the contracts. We do have a couple other things to touch on. Item 11 on the agenda, I think, is a discussion of the future of MGT and the future of this engagement. So I do want to come back to that topic. We have more to some discussion. But I appreciate your questions on the connection between the assessment and the other parts of the engagement. Any other questions regarding the LSI contract?
Just one quick question, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I just want to make sure I wrap my mind around this. You've got some money, you're going after some more money. You need to have a plan, and you're looking at bringing in additional resources to strictly focus on academics with the money that you're going after.
Yes, sir.
Did I sum that up? Did I
Perfectly.
leave anything out, or?
That's it.
You're gonna focus on assessment of the academics.
Yes,
Not
as a starting point.
As a starting point, and then that'll develop.
That'll
Are you
frame.
going to develop a plan that you're gonna present, like Representative Smith is asking about, what you're doing with this assessment?
Well, we did last month, and then this will assess where we are, and then what additional things we need to overlap onto that plan.
What's the outcome? What are you gonna do following this plan?
Well, yeah, anytime, you've probably heard with schools, concepts of accreditation, evaluation, DOE does assessments. And so this is just a third party giving us, because anytime you do your own assessment, I was great today, with rose colored glasses. And so we want, a third party's opinion about where we are, and where we need to go. And then our academic.
Present that assessment.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. At the end of the day, the results of that assessment, if we're successful with the school improvement grant, is going to drive the dollar application. And I would be happy to share the application with you. But if we're not successful with those funds, that's where you all have allowed us to set aside ESSER 3 money specifically focused on it. So either way, we know we need to put money towards academics, and this will let us fine tune, get into the minutia, where do we need to go? And that's where, we just want to do a new diagnostic. If something's wrong with your car, I know you're a car guy, you run the diagnostic, figure out what's issues and move forward. And so we want to do that right now.
When do you expect that would be done?
They're partnering with us and actually they've already started. And then should be on site in 2 or 3 weeks.
Well, I think what I hear, and Mr. Joyce or Mr. Bennett, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what I hear is an interest from you and Representative Smith as well, maybe to bring that assessment back as appropriate and let's have a conversation, share with us what's there. I think hungry for that visibility and the opportunity to engage on that topic. We talked a lot about the need to focus on academics. We've built the foundation operationally and financially, and we now finally have the luxury of really putting all of our efforts into what we want schools to be putting their efforts in.
Right.
Which is
We're
education.
extremely excited about it, and
Yeah.
extremely excited to see the results, and certainly we'll bring them back and then talk about where we're headed after we get a baseline.
Are you expecting just positive results, like you've increased 0.2% or 3%?
I would say we're looking
Failure, or are we looking at this is the strict areas that we need to still focus on for success to occur, not just incremental increases?
So the one of the main reasons we're doing it is a condition the DOE has placed on the funds for schools that are eligible, that if you're going to improve academic performance, you need to first know what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses. I think we have a lot of strengths that we can rely upon, but we naturally are wanting to look at what is their opinion of our weaknesses so that we can address them. So it's very much looking for constructive criticism so that we can improve.
Mr. Chairman, we have an issue which comes first, the horse or the cart. You said you had a plan that was presented last month, and now you're doing an assessment. I mean, the plan comes as a result of the assessment. And I will assert to you, and I'm not trying to embarrass anyone, I'm not trying to hurt anybody. I'm trying to get our school corporation where I want it to be, where the community wants to be, where we expect it to be. And I'm saying to you, that was not a plan last week that we had. And that's why I had a discussion with the two of you for an hour or more. It wasn't a plan. I'm not trying to get press out of this. I'm trying to get a change. And let me just say to you that if you have a DIP, which is a district improvement plan, which is a witness for the district, and that's what they were reporting for the district, not a SIP, which is a school improvement plan, but you have to have SIP plans that are tied to the DIP, the district plan. You've got to identify your weaknesses. And what normally happens in a DIP or a SIP is that you set goals based on weaknesses. I didn't see any of that in the plan. They were looking at an overall picture of effective school service. That's what you plant the seeds in. The instructional seeds in goes into those 7 correlates. But you gotta identify what are your weaknesses, whether they're in math, reading, wherever they are, science, any of those areas. And you base your goals based on attacking one of those areas that is part of the testing process. And then your objectives looks at the sub skills. And then your strategies are ways that we meet those sub skills. That was not a plan. That was not a plan, and I'm not trying to embarrass anybody. It was not a plan. And I'm just saying, the assurance that you gave me was that somebody was going to be there with MDT to create a plan. And then I'm hearing you got it last week. That was not a plan.
Well, to respond to your comment, I think what I saw in the plan that was presented last time was an articulation of some broad approaches and a philosophy of how to approach this issue. But what I didn't see there, and I agree with you, is a plan of attack, right? I don't see we have this problem and this is what we're going to do, and this problem and this is what we're going to do. And what I hear the team saying to us today is that's an ongoing effort. This is part of that effort.
Right, but if they
to assess and identify
that they had a plan already, that concerns me.
Well, I don't know.
And you do an assessment
Well,
after the fact.
well, I'd like to finish speaking.
Your question was, were you going to, is the instruction plan going to come? Her response was, you got one last report. How can you have a plan before you get the
Representative Smith, I appreciate that. But I view this as an ongoing process and an approach, and that's exactly what I would expect them to be doing. What they articulated to us was a broad, brushstroked philosophy, I suppose, of how you would approach this. I'm not an expert on the academic side, and so I'm probably struggling with the lingo more than I should, or than I'd like to in this particular instance. But how I read that plan, and I think what we heard was an approach that fits naturally with where they're going now. And I think that was driving deeper.
Mr. Chairman,
And I appreciate
it. Then I'm gonna rest on this topic. You can't solve a problem unless you recognize there is a problem.
I agree.
And I don't think this board seems to understand that there is a problem academically. And if you were concerned about it, you'd be more methodic in the way that you're solving it. I'm suggesting to you, and this is just my view, and I have more than 50 years in education, 30 years with preparing principals. I'm saying to you that you need to get more serious about this. And I'm speaking for my community, from the depths of our hearts, from the top of our hearts, all portions of our heart. You got to get better.
Well, I think I can say we are serious about academics. This board has continually
You should know them by the fruit that they bear.
pushed on
You know
academics.
them by the fruit that they
I
bear.
understand that. And we saw some of that fruit last meeting, and I'm optimistic, though cautiously optimistic, about what that might indicate. I look forward to seeing more of that. But what I do see is a consistent approach out of this team to tackle various issues, and there are many issues relating to the academic
You can be
foundation.
consistent going in the wrong direction. You can, consistency is not a,
And we
is.
will all have opinions about,
Attribute.
Representative Smith, if I could finish. We will all have opinions about what the appropriate approach is to how to address these issues, and I understand that we may disagree about what that appropriate approach is, but I do see a consistent attack by this team after issues that are for academics, whether that is improving the teacher workforce through continuing to aggressively hire and bring in new teachers, the effort to increase teacher compensation, the effort to increase the school day from one of the shortest school days in the state to one of the longer school days in the state, efforts to align curriculum across elementary and middle school, efforts to put in place a formative
what you know. And I would never say anything disparaging about the teachers. But there's the teachers who are complaining about the system. And so teachers who are coming to me, then I come to, they don't even know how to get to you.
Do they?
So, don't, first of all, don't point your finger at me.
But
First of all, okay? Do not do that.
I want to make, but Representative Smith, if you could finish, and then Ms. Kubaki will come back. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to speak to
Mr. Representative Smith, do you have more to say? Okay. Ms. Kubaki, is there anything else?
I am just saying, I know we all have the same goal. Whether it's DUAB, the teachers, the superintendent, we all have the same goal, and that is to bring the kids to their potential. And it's, from where we started, I look at this, more, summer school was successful last year, it's gonna be more successful this year. The fact that they had a track meet in 300 years, or in 30 years, it shows that the community is starting to rally around the schools and the school system. And we have to acknowledge those gains, no matter how small, they're gains. And I just think, again, it goes back to the fact that none of us want these kids to fail. We all want them to succeed. And I applaud the hard work that the teachers, and, again, they may not be perfect, but when something goes wrong, you address it and you try to correct it. But I just think that we have to acknowledge the work that has been done. And, obviously we want to go faster, but strides have been made and we cannot dismiss that.
Senator Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to stick to the agenda, and I understand, I believe we're sort of talking around this, but I might just add that there has been learning loss across the state as well as across the country because of the pandemic. So the decline in test scores or declining graduation cannot be considered indicative of this particular school district because the entire state has suffered. In fact, such to the point, Representative Thompson and Representative Smith know that we have, what did we say about the grades? We've just negated them for 3 years running now, so it's all for naught. So I don't even know how you do an assessment anymore unless it's an individual, because there's nothing to compare it with in our alternative reality right now. So what I think was most disturbing to me the last 2 cycles in the legislature was listening to some school representatives, whether they were board members or teachers or whomever, not even calling it a learning loss. So Gary's school systems were a unique situation when DUAB took them over. And the $100 million debt that this state had to grapple with is beyond my comprehension, quite frankly. And I did not start on DUAB when Gary started with DUAB. But I think the progress that Gary Community Schools has made, independent of their management system, is impressive. And the fact that in the middle of that economic tar pit, that they've been able to have a referendum and move forward and make improvements is impressive. And yes, paintings on schools, I would have been the first to say, who cares? It matters. If there's community pride, people will go to the schools, stay in the schools, and parents will start participating more in the schools, which is the crux of any educational foundation. So with that being said, I would like to continue to move on the agenda, but at the same time, understand that the situation is not unique to the Gary system. I don't know if they're any dire or in better shape than any other academic institution, but I certainly am aware of, and I'm not speaking to anyone individually, by the way, I am certainly aware of the fact that in certain school systems, there are some children who are significantly behind, in addition to having now been hamstrung by the COVID impact. So with that, I'd like to move forward because I would like to see progress, not just with Gary, but all of our students in the state.
Senator Brown. All right. think we've covered the Learning Sciences International contract sufficiently. I would like to move to item 10, where we have 4 different contracts related to largely to operational and capital items. And that I will take those as we did last time, we'll take them as a group for a vote unless somebody requests that we hear one individually. So with that, Nathan, are you presenting the contracts?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So to briefly cover these, and then glad to answer any questions. The first one before you is a classroom security retrofit through Anderson Lock. This is to address the interior locks of all buildings across the entire district, to make sure that we have master keys available so that our janitorial and principal staff don't have to carry, a movie prop size set of rings. We also want to make sure that we upgrade the technology of locks. Locks have changed in 20, 30, 40 years, that some of these locks have been in presence. So we know that it's based upon a recommendation of a safety audit that we had, that you all had heard us talk about before. And so this is going to improve use of access across the district for interior rooms.
Are there any questions on the security locks? Thank you. Please proceed.
Okay. The next contract is for the purchase of 3 buses. You've heard Mr. Miller present a couple activity buses that we purchased a few months ago that are in transit. We are wanting to purchase a few more. This was made available because as part of the American Rescue Plan, which is the master federal law for ESSER 3, there were 2 pots of money that were unique to certain student populations, one of them being students with disabilities, and then another one being children experiencing homelessness. And both of those laws allow for one-time uses that we're asking for with buses. So this is to supplement our existing relationship with our busing vendor. This is so that if there ever was a gap, we could fill that gap with our own drivers, our own vehicles, to make sure that our neediest students have the transportation that they are entitled to. So that is the busing contract for the purchase of 3 more.
How are these buses maintained? How do you handle that aspect?
Yeah, so we'll do some in-house, and then we have a service agreement with a local Gary service garage that will help us with brakes and will help us with oil changes and so on. And then
But we have a facility that we can lock them up in, and have a transportation garage, if you will.
You do? Okay.
Yes. Yeah, and we'll have policies and procedures. We already are actually working on them now in anticipation of the activity buses arriving that were previously approved, to make sure that anyone who drives them has the proper certification, that they follow protocol. And then, yes, they'll be nightly behind lock and key when they are not being used.
We currently have anywhere from 50 to 75 students, homeless students, that we have a contractor that picks students up to and from school currently. So this would enable us to do it in-house, cheaper.
Other questions regarding the buses?
Mr. Chairman, real quick question. Life expectancy of these buses, any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I mean, obviously depends upon use. 2 of these 3 are going to be yellow school buses that will need a CDL, and all of the state law that requires inspections are going to take place. And then once you hit so many miles, you can't use it anymore. And so at the end of the day, we're obviously working through transportation over time, and working on it one year at a time.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Maybe a better question is, you expect these to be used in a similar fashion or have a similar life cycle as a normal, I'm going to say just a normal bus?
Yeah, and even possibly greater, because there's specific pots of money that are paying for these buses to use for specific children. So it's not necessarily a general transportation bus. If we use it for other purposes, we have to essentially do some accounting for that.
It should easily be working still 15 years from now. Yeah.
Is the maintenance shop, is that a new, is it something new or is that something you've had existing where
We have
you'll, this will just fold in? So it's not an added, there's some added cost obviously to maintain any vehicle, but
Yeah.
you're not standing up a new shop to be able to.
No.
No, we have an existing buildings and ground building, and we do currently have a handful of corporation-owned vehicles, the security vehicles that are still in transit. If you've ever tried to buy a car the last couple of months, you know how hard it has been. So we are getting those, but it is taking some time. But yeah, we have an existing set of vehicles that small in number and quite old, but that's why we're doing some of this work. But yeah, and making sure that the fencing is proper and the locks are proper before we get these new vehicles in.
Okay, thank you. Anthony Roofing.
Sorry, I spoke so long, my computer turned. All right, there we go. Okay, Anthony Roofing is the next piece. You all have approved roofing projects several times. These are now the specifics that are coming back. This is unique. I learned a lot about roofing the last couple months with this project. This is addressing our quote 3 new buildings, which are almost 20 years old. So any of you that own a house know that 20 years is a pretty good length of time for a roof. So they are not in need of full roof replacement. That could wait a few years. If we wait a few years, the cost is going to be 60% more. So there's a new roofing technology that basically allows you to skim coat the existing roof and put this honestly mesh fabric coating on top that when done is warranted for 20 years. But it costs 60% less than replacing the full roof. So essentially you have to do it before your roof is gone, when it's still got a little bit of life left in it. So we're trying to do it in a proactive manner to make sure that not just the schools that have needed full roof replacements are being addressed, but our buildings are in a preventative way are being addressed to save us money. So the contract in front of you shows the cost savings of $1.8 million. That'll just grow if we were to further delay this project, and it will be paid for out of the already approved ESSER 2 funds for this purpose.
Questions on this contract?
Yes, please, Mr. Chairman. Nathan, how much longer is this going to, and I'm not a roofer, I know you're not a roofer,
Yeah.
but did they give you any idea of how long this will extend the life of that roof?
20 years. Honestly, that's why I was a little surprised, because it's supposed to last as long as if we had done a full roof replacement. They actually are going to warranty it for 20 years. This is a technology, it sounds weird calling it technology, but it honestly is, that many businesses are starting to do and consider. Our facilities director said, no one's going to replace roofs anymore when they find out about this product. So honestly, it's a no-brainer in terms of you just got to do it before the roof is fully gone. Okay. And then 20 years beyond that is how long they'll in writing warranty their products.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Representative.
I waited, in his reporting of his presentation, you mentioned Anderson Locks, and you mentioned just recently Anthony Roofing. Those two are ones that I'm concerned about. How were these projects advertised? Because I see we have no local providers.
So all of our bids go to the Gary Chamber. They're put in the paper, they're put on our website. We send them to the Northwest Indiana Development Centers.
We have several locksmiths in Gary, but
You didn't
make it no one bid, and we only have one roofing company, which is Turner. Did they bid?
They have done some,
I asked the question, did they bid?
Well,
not on this.
Well, I think
this roofing project, this is a niche opportunity. A lot of roofing companies don't do this. We engaged this roofing contract through a cooperative in Indiana, which Indiana state law allows for. And companies all across the state have the ability to bid into those cooperatives that schools can then access. So whenever we say any vendor in Indiana has the ability to put their name in the hat for those cooperatives, and then schools pick from that list, and that eases the burden of paperwork on school systems. So there always is the opportunity for local input and ability to bid on contracts.
But these two are not Indiana businesses there, don't know that business. How they get into the mix.
Well, one, federal money is paying for this. And federal money prohibits you from having state level preferences. So whenever you are doing something like that with the roofing project, the federal government doesn't care if it's an Illinois vendor versus an Indiana vendor. They want the best quality at the best price. And so we've got to keep, now, we always recommend we advertise to our local Gary vendors because we want to give them an equal playing chance, if not better, than anybody else to at least put their name in the hat. But at the end of the day, we can't pick a Gary vendor solely because they're a Gary vendor.
Well, I wouldn't expect you just solely because they're Gary, they would be expected to provide the necessary services to the same level. I just want to remind outside entity that there's still a Gary business base there.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we've contracted with a lot of Gary businesses and look forward to continue doing so.
Other questions on the roofing contracts? All right, the next contract?
Okay. Lastly, this is an educational one. Several years have passed that we've had phase one. This is now phase two to outfit all classrooms, finishing by putting ViewSonic boards, which are interactive boards that teachers can use when they're teaching to manipulate what's on the screen, to allow kids to do voting and real-time access and lots of different instructional interactive tools rather than just having a chalkboard up there. So about half of our classrooms have it now. The DUAB approved almost 2 years ago. But we are now outfitting the rest of the district with these same boards. It's a benefit not doing it at the same time because then you don't have all of them that need replaced all at the same time. So we've tried to be strategic with phasing in and for training. We want, if you provide it for the entire district at once, maybe not all teachers are ready. Several teachers have been able to see it in use with their peers and training internally so that we're now ready. So this would be an instructional activity at an S or two.
Questions on the ViewSonic boards contract? Right. Thank you, Nathan. Appreciate that. As I said, I prefer to take all four of these, to approve all four of these together. We just need to approve the district to move forward with the contract at the amounts and more than the amounts listed. So with that, I would entertain a motion.
I move we accept all contracts bidded.
Motion and a second.
No, possible section. We had talked about the price for the buses potentially don't need to add in.
Thank you. Yeah, so as I mentioned before, when you buy vehicles, they change almost while you're on the lot, besides a few days after. So with the busing one specifically, we do have a quote, but they'll honor it for essentially that day. And so we are expecting that the price will be a little fluid. They gave us an update already. So Mr. Miller and I discussed a contingency. The board has done it in the past, like say 10%, that if you all approve, then I would, before signing it, communicate with Mr. Miller the final price. And if it's to his satisfaction, we move forward.
I would be comfortable with that, Mr. Brown.
I would too. When will the dealer lock in the price? When will the price? Do we have to give a deposit? Is there a signed contract? At what point will the price be firm?
It is when we sign the contract, and I just haven't done it because I haven't gotten your approval. So I think once I get your approval, yes. I literally usually text while I'm sitting here.
And that's fine, I just didn't want it to be a time of delivery, which is gonna be.
No,
several
so
months down.
essentially the price in front of you, I haven't signed, therefore it's not locked in.
Yeah, good.
So the price that we will essentially see is likely to be a few percentage points higher.
Ms. Kubaki, would you be willing to amend your motion?
I'm willing to amend it.
All right. So the motion is to approve the contracts as presented at the amount stated, with the opportunity, or the allowance for the Bluebird contract to be up to 10% higher, to be approved by Executive Director Miller upon review. Yes. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Right. Would you call the roll?
Mr. Bennett?
Yes.
Mr. Joyce?
Yes.
Ms. Kabaki?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Chairman McAdam?
Yes.
Passes 5-0.
All right, thank you. Thank you all. So up next, we have our last item of scheduled business today. And as we alluded to earlier, we've listed this as a discussion of the manager contract with MGT. So as you'll recall, we entered into a 2-year contract with MGT 2 years ago in 2020, just in the midst of the pandemic, just as Dr. McNulty had joined the team. And at that time, we set the contract at 2 years because it was unclear about the length of time that would be needed and how the project would progress, particularly in light of the pandemic. Fast forward to today, this current contract is set to expire at the end of June. And as required by the law, we need to have somebody engaged to manage the day-to-day operations of the Gary Community School Corporation. You remember that last month or at our last meeting, MGT presented to us that we have eliminated the operating deficit. Tremendous accomplishment to have moved from a $22 million a year negative deficit to a $2 million per year positive surplus. Meaning that we are now in a position where we are taking in more money than we are sending out the door on a year-over-year basis, and we expect that to continue into the future. Due in no small part to the referendum and the support of the community, but also to the management of MGT and the team. And so, I think the way to describe where we are currently is really we are at the beginning of the end. This engagement from the beginning, as I understood it from the charge from the legislature, though not explicitly stated, but I think if you read the statute carefully, this is clear, was primarily around a financial and operational turnaround. The state's involvement or the legislative charge was to stabilize the district financially and put it on a path to solvency, such that it could be moved from state control at that point. However, we are in a position where the statute does not provide for what comes next. The statute does allow this board to remove Gary Community Schools from distressed status and return the district to someone else, but there is no someone else specified in the statute currently, and that is really a question that has to be answered by the legislature. It is a question that they have not yet answered, but we anticipate, and I think the timing is right, to present that question again to them in 2023 and work with the legislature at that point to attempt to identify that next governing body, that next leadership structure for Gary Community Schools. But that question is yet to be answered. And as we sit here today, the answer to that question is at least a year away. The end of the next legislative session really won't come until the end of April of 2023, most likely. And so we still have some time here before we will have an answer to that question. And then, of course, the other part of that, however the legislature answers that question, will still require time to transition responsibly and carefully from the current management structure to the next leadership team, and to give that next team an opportunity, one, to identify that next set of leaders, whoever has to do that, and give them a chance to get up to speed, but also an opportunity for that governing body to put in place a superintendent or executive to lead the district and a team to accompany that. And so when I think about that in my own mind, that leaves us about 2 years away from the end of a responsible transition. The legislature could specify a different timeline for us, and that remains to be answered, but I think we should be prudent in planning for at least 2 years. And so the question for this board really is a question of how to proceed through the next 2 years, or how to plan for the next 2 years in light of the current landscape. And I think we really have two options. We can renew MGT and can continue forward with MGT through what Eric would describe as phase 3 of the engagement. I think he described that as completion of the engagement, subject to the legislature's direction. Or this board, as is our prerogative, could seek out alternative managers to engage in this project and take us through the final 2 years as well. I think both of those options present various risks and opportunities that it would be important to take into consideration. And so I think today, what I would like to do is really give this board an opportunity to weigh in on that question and have a discussion about how to proceed and really what the right course of action is as we decide how to move forward. So what I would like to do is, before we jump into really a discussion back and forth, I'd like to give each member an opportunity to share their view of the situation and how we should proceed, and then from there pivot to a discussion about next steps or what actions we might want to consider. So I'm just going to go down the line. Mr. Bennett, if you would lead us off, and we'll go around this way, and then we'll go around this way to allow everyone an opportunity to provide their perspective.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've given this quite a bit of thought as well. And I think your timing, the timetable on the 2 years is about right. Again, depending on what the legislature does. I think making a major change to an emergency manager has a lot of drawbacks, and you mentioned the pros and cons. I think it's going to lose momentum in both the fiscal and the academic progress that we're making. I think there's going to be a loss of institutional knowledge that I think would make it difficult for a new emergency manager to get back up to speed. I also want to make sure that we push even harder to see quantitative improvement in Gary Community Schools, and I will be pushing MGT, if they're the emergency manager that continues to take Gary forward. I will be making sure that we are aggressively making sure that they manage and come up with a plan. To your point, Dr. Smith, a real plan to get the Gary Community School academic progress moving forward. So in my feeling right now, moving to a new emergency manager would be too disruptive, and I think we'd be ill-advised to make any changes at this time. It's my feeling at this point.
Thank you.
George?
Thank you. As everybody knows, I've been here from day one, and we were constituted as a board to bring the Gary Community Schools into financial sustainability model. And at the time, we interviewed a lot of different possible emergency managers. And at the time, we actually did ask lots of questions, and NGT did bring the best package to the table as far as overall aspect of improving the financial stability of Gary Community Schools. Without financial stability of the school system itself, Gary Community Schools will fail. When it does fail, it would turn to all charter schools. That's not what anybody wants. They want a community school within Gary. And so in our thoughts 5 years ago, it was to fund and find a financial sustainable model. I do believe we're there. We're at the point where we are financially sustainable. Part of that did include the referendum. It was required to be done if Gary was ever going to be financially sustainable. It had to be, okay? Does that address the learning losses that are being shown? It does not. But as Senator Brown pointed out, learning loss is something that in the last two and a half years has occurred in every single school. It's not an excuse. It's a reality. Okay, now that's not saying that we can't look at Gary and say we can make Gary a better place. But for Gary to become a better educational institution from an academic standpoint, it will involve not only NGT, but the entire community to bring those standards to that level. It doesn't matter what school we went to. I mean, for the time I was the youngest kid, the requirement for me to be educated was on me. It was my parents and the people at home that told me how and what I needed to achieve. No school is any different than that. And any education, doesn't matter who's bringing it, it is up to that community and up to the school. One of the numbers that I wrote down, and Micah, which was the chair of the board when we started this, and he talked about the sustainability of the future of Gary Community Schools is and does and will always be on the enrollment numbers that are within the school. You have 11,370 available kids within the Gary Community School systems. Only 4,380 go to Gary Community Schools. 6,990 outside your school system itself. Yes, financial stability. We have to be there. For people to want to belong. They want to belong to, whether it's a business, whether it's an educational institution, or anything. It's something that's going to be there and be a viable entity for them to be partake in for their life. And for that to happen, we had to be viably in a financial management way. Secondly, we have to find a way together to find a solution to the academic issues that arise, along with staying financially sustainable. To do that, it will take community, and it will take, whether it's NGT or any other management company. And I have to agree with Wes on this one. It doesn't matter whether I like NGT or don't like NGT. 2 years is what we're looking at exiting. I want, and I've said it from day one, I don't want to be on the board of Gary Community Schools. I want Gary Community to be on the Gary Community School Board, not me. Okay? For that to happen, I do believe that changing that structure at this point in time would only harm us moving from this structure to a Gary community structure. And I would not want to harm that progress.
I would be in support of continuing with NGT because we have so much invested already. We've made progress. It hasn't been ideal, but I agree with Wes. From this point on, academics has to be emphasized. And if also, we wouldn't have had classrooms if we were in the financial situation that we were in a couple of years ago. I suggest we continue. I think it'd be harmful to the students if we were to start all over again with this process and just make it even a longer process. But again, with the caveat that we need to stress the academic portion at this point.
Yeah, this discussion and the nature of it is what I expected 2 years ago when you initiated an additional contract. I knew that it was going to extend it. Not that I profited, but I predicted it. And I had a discussion with you. And I could reckon about that when we were trying to agree on 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years gist of my perspective on this. So, this does not come as a shockwave for me. But I'm here to represent my district, to represent my community, to represent the Gary Community School Corporation parent bodies and citizens who are paid to an investment of our schools. The argument has been projected around this table that everybody had learning loss in the last 2 years. That's a given. That's why we have the double grades that we've been passing in legislation. But I think we're mixing apples with oranges when we look at the whole time that MGT has been in place. That's a 5-year period that came before COVID. And the loss was seen immediately in those 3 years prior to COVID. So we start comparing the whole state. You can't effectively and analytically do that because you're looking at a 5-year period versus the last 2 years. I said to you prior to this that this community wants a hearing in Gary, and I would respectfully ask those of you who are around here, if you want engagement, you want to involve in this community, you've got to involve them in it. And I'm saying that if you don't do it, then you don't want engagement because it's not there now. The involvement is not there now. And if you're going to be successful, then you've got to give them a voice. Right now, they feel like voiceless, and that gives them that you become helpless and hopeless. That is not desirable if you're trying to turn things around. I feel that we have not really addressed, and I give them credit for the fiscal responsibility that they've shown. Certainly, that was the reason why Gary was in the takeover situation. But at the same time, when we look at their academic achievement, maybe their contract should be in that arena. It probably should have been just in that arena before and left the academic side alone. When we look at the operational school, there's 2 domains. One is management, the other one is supervision. If all of us understand management, I think that they may be expert in that area. That's questionable as well. But as far as supervision, which is improving instruction in order to increase student learning, I'm not sure that they have the ability to do that. So speaking for the community, and I think that I am speaking for the community, just from hearing the voices on the ground. The community does not want MGT, but we understand fully that we don't have to go and we don't move. We understand that we don't have the authority, we can't make decisions. So speaking for this community, that they no longer want MGT to be in place. I think that we have to understand that there's 2 different perspectives that we have on this board. One is the local perspective, the other is the perspective that those people with authority around here hold. And I think there's a diabolical difference between those 2. So speaking for the community, we don't want MGT. We know that we have to have a transition plan. That's why you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Miller, and the Gary delegation worked so hard during the last session trying to come to a transition plan. It didn't materialize. You know, it has to materialize. However, I certainly appreciate that we may not want to start over from square one. I see the value of that. But I would be less than representative of my district if I just said that I don't know what that represents the community would approve of a continuation of MGT. And I want to make this spring water crystal clear. I bowed out of that last discussion because we was going to go back and forth and back and forth. I will stand behind what I said. I will continue to be just as vocal about the needs of our community and the views of our community. Because I really feel if I don't say it, then it won't be said. So I'm going to say what I need to say. Whether you like it or not, hate me, dislike me, want to dispel me from this body, I'm going to say what I think my community wants said. So, I bowed out out of respect to the chair, and I do respect you. Okay. I bowed out of it because the interest of time. But my views are the views, I believe, 100% of the community, and I will continue to say them. So if MGT does get this contract, which I could predict, and I'm not a bad man, but I put my last dollar that they're going to get it. The bottom line is that the community do not want.
Thank you, Representative Smith. Ms. Brown?
Yes, I too would support the continuation of the contract. I share the concerns that everyone else mentioned in terms of loss of momentum. And I just can't wrap my head around shifting gears at this point. I would also, in alignment with what I said, would want some strong academic components to this agreement. And whatever academic experts at the department can assist with that, I think that's very important.
Senator Brown?
Yes, I couldn't go in good conscience back to Senate Appropriations Committee in a budget year and suggest that we look to transition away from DUAB's oversight if we changed management right now. Because if we really are on a 2-year trajectory to exiting this contract, then I can't imagine changing now and starting over, because any good management company would want to do a total reassessment from physical facilities on. And we don't have that kind of luxury financially, I don't think. And so along the lines of some previous comments, I'm never going to start talking about why we got here. It is a perverse luxury to talk about academics, but I don't believe that the entire academic staff was overturned when MGT took over. Those teachers are still, many of them are still on the ground there. And so I think I'm going to turn to them and say, help us in this journey to now move along with the academics as well as all the operations that we've made the progress on. They had the shortest school day in the state. They had $100 million in debt, $22 million a year deficit spending. There are only 11,000 potential students, and we're spending $22 million more a year than you were taking in revenues. And now we no longer have a deficit. Several years ago, some members in these hearings talked about removing the state's oversight. Way too prematurely. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. The good and bad of this is that this template has been used for other school districts to forever prevent a Gary from happening again, so that the state doesn't have to be this heavy-handed and absorb these costs, because all these dollars are dollars not being spent elsewhere or not being spent in your own community on academics because toilets weren't running, there wasn't hot water, the heat and air conditioning didn't work, roofs were leaking, whole infrastructure was missing, lawn mowers, buses, whatever, nothing was working. Let's not forget that, because I'm not forgetting that. And so it would be very hard for me to turn to my fellow legislators and say, we're ready to let them go, when we have literally stuck our hands into this mess and tried to dig out the good from everything in there. And everybody has done a great job, not just MGT, but the Gary community and the Gary teachers, because everybody had to come together and realize everyone had some ownership of the past mistakes and how to make the improvements. And I'm sure everybody had to give a little bit. And the referendum was an example of that. For the Gary community, in spite of what has been said, maybe they don't like MGT specifically, but to vote for that as a parent or as a taxpayer, you have to understand that you see light at the end of the tunnel. And that's a good thing. So I think we're making great progress. I personally have said this before, I would urge you to look at the Ball State model when we had a informal takeover of the Muncie school system. They've done a great job as well in terms of all of their local board now are local, how they selected their school board. They don't need, in a sense, to have a Ball State come in. What I'm saying is that was an informal takeover, and what they didn't lose teachers. They are making academic progress. They didn't lose enrollment, but they were in difficult straits, not dire, but difficult straits. And so there are models out there on how to transition when this contract's over. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Brown. President Thompson?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Excuse me. Dr. Smith and Senator Brown and myself. There's 3 of us in this room out of 147 that's constitutionally required to have a system of education that said what is it, Section 8 or Article 8, Section 1, Dr. Smith, the Constitution, we're required to do that. And I can fairly say the other 147 really, just like we really want those children to be successful. Because, Dr. Smith, Senator Brown knows that if a person's well educated, it opens all kinds of doors. So we can never dispute 147, 150 of us, plus all of us in this room, those kids, those students to be the best educated possible. Now, with that said, when that day comes that school we transition away from the current structure, we want success. We do not want to go backwards. Will not be good. And the one thing that I think could help is that we make a good transition with all the physical parts, just not the academic. Yes, the academics are very important. And there's a lot, from my view, loose ends out there in the physical side. It's a lot because of federal dollars. And even, from my view, to think about some of the transitions if you went away from MGT and went someplace else. There's so many loose ends. And how to maximize those dollars. Because we want to leave that school system whenever the state steps away in the best shape possible. Got to be that way. And can't disagree. We've got to make progress in the academics. And I would encourage, the members of the board to push on that and do that. But from the fiscal side, I think that to change horses now would not be the best way to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, and I'll echo your comments there. I think as I think about where we are and what's left ahead of us, the idea of starting a transition this summer, only to turn around and begin a transition, hopefully, a year from now, strikes me as being incredibly disruptive to the Gary Community School System and to the educational program and the academic outcomes of the district. And I worry that, anytime you bring somebody new in, right? MGT, if we changed, MGT has to transfer its knowledge, et cetera, to whoever would take over. And let's assume we could find somebody better. And that's an important question not to lose sight of, and I'll come back to that. But whoever that is has their own ideas. They have their own leadership, their own program about how they're going to want to run a school, how they want to approach this project, what their objectives will be, and who their people are. And anytime you're changing programs, you're changing people, you're changing leadership philosophies, that just takes time to settle back into a rhythm, and that's at least a year. And as I think about a school calendar, and I think about where we've been here, that takes time just to settle out into some sort of normal routine for people to adapt to that. And what we're aiming towards is another transition in leadership, just 2 years ahead, hopefully. And you're going to be doing that same thing, and you're going to have all of those same changes again. And I worry about the whipsaw that occurs when we tell people, hey, you're here, now you're up here. um, that's challenging for adults and for people who get paid to do it. And I think it's probably even more challenging for students and parents to keep up with that changing environment. But the other piece, and coming back to the other question, is can we find somebody better? To Paul's point, we had an extensive search the first time, and we saw a number of different approaches and different candidates, but it is very difficult to evaluate success from the outside and whether somebody and a team is up to the job and whether they are able to tackle the challenge that's in front of them. And the grass is always greener on the other side just until you get there. And I worry about that a lot. And whether I'm not optimistic that we won't encounter many of the same challenges that MGT has already encountered. I see good faith out of this team. I've gotten to know Eric and Paige and others very well, and I know their hearts, and I know what they're trying to accomplish, and that can't be underestimated. And I know that they are working diligently to make the best decisions they can in the circumstances that they find themselves. And so to think that we might somehow achieve different results in that time, I'm just not confident that we would get there. Right? And I think we are better off, as others have alluded to, investing this time in building and solidifying the foundation that's already been put in place. That's the financial foundation. We still need to continue to build a reserve. We don't have a savings account at Gary Schools. We could really use one. Every other district in the state has a larger reserve balance than Gary Schools, which currently has a negative reserve balance. So there's still room to grow. There are negative fund balances. Paul and his team will attest to. There's some audit issues that need to be dealt with, internal controls and just financial operational issues, special education operational issues. There are lots of things that are continuing to receive attention and development. But then there's also the work just on the organizational front and building a stable team. There's still room to talk about stabilizing the people in the organization. We don't want all of these people who are sitting in front of us today to be gone on day one of whatever the next transition is. That's disruptive all by itself. And a huge loss of institutional knowledge and experience. And hopefully many of them will stay around, or those who are not part of MGT. And the other piece of that is academics. We now have the luxury, and I hate to call it a luxury, but that is the reality based on where we've been in the past, to focus on building that infrastructure. As we talked about earlier, I think they've done a tremendous effort at putting building blocks in place. I don't know that it's the right program or the right plan. I'm not the best expert to evaluate that. And I appreciate that you have a lot more expertise on that, Representative Smith, than I do. However, at the same time, I see a lot of what appear to me to be very wise decisions about allocating resources towards instruction, allocating people, systems, and creating a landscape that allows that to happen. So, from my perspective, it's an opportunity to continue to push forward and propel ourselves and build a foundation that hopefully what is that next chapter in Gary Community Schools governance, an opportunity to create a launch pad for them to propel themselves forward at that point and continue that progress without losing ground. So that is my perspective. Welcome other thoughts and as to how we might proceed. I don't think it's appropriate necessarily today, as Dr. Smith has said. We could the community's input and their voice is an important part of this process, but do you think we should think about how we proceed forward and how we might want to proceed?
Mr. Chairman, to Dr. Smith's point about a meeting in Gary, would that be appropriate to at least propose today? Is there a plan to go up there or sometime in the near future?
I think that's the right next step, that we ought to hold a meeting in Gary. We have done that traditionally.
Yeah.
You know, I would propose framing that meeting maybe a little differently than we have in the past. I hear a lot of consensus that perhaps the right direction to go is continuing with MGT for a lot of different reasons. But there's still a lot of question about what the priorities and the focus ought to be in those next 2 years and where we ought to spend those efforts. And I guess I'd be interested in focusing the community. They can certainly speak to whatever aspect they want to, but inviting feedback on exactly what that focus should be as we have a much more open playing field in front of us than typically.
But I'd like to see us go to Gary. I'd like the next meeting, if at all possible, would be there. I'd like to see, I'd like to see at least the contract revised to a point where that we really hone in on the academic part. I know that we moved in that direction the last few years ago. If we've got some more work to do there, let's do that over the course of the next 60 days or sooner. And Dr. Smith, appreciate your input and even those of the community on what maybe those parameters might look like for goals and what we expect MGT to do from an academic standpoint.
If I may respond to that, their concerns still fall on the same 3 areas: engagement, communication. That's the same concern they had 2 years ago. Nothing's changed.
Can you, leaving the engagement and the communication side, and I'm not trying to say those are less important.
But see, what they presented you the 7 quarters of effective schools research. The first generation of effective schools research came out with 5 quarters. They said nothing about community. But they came back and said you can't do it without the community involvement. That comes through communication and engagement of the community. You know, when you're throwing dinners and other kinds of things, that's fine for relationships and so forth, but that's not aimed at involvement and aimed at
But
engagement.
Dr. Smith, there's a 2-lane highway here on engagement. Okay, and when I reach out to somebody, and if they don't reach back, there can't be engagement. I feel like I can be engaged with Garrett anytime and every time that I want to be, whether it be from a social media standpoint, whether it be visiting the schools, whether it be having a phone call or an email, or all the levels of engagement. I feel like I can participate in, and I'm down here.
Okay, let me just indicate that I think the parents can speak better for themselves. I think the community citizens can speak better for themselves than I can.
Yeah, but you're in the community.
Okay, but let me just make this point. It's when we start talking about engagement, you don't tell parents they can't come over. When you start talking about communication, you don't tell parents they can't. Now, I have never tried to go on the grounds that I've been there, but I've had enough people who come to me who said that they were. And I'm just saying, we've had a policy in. Can I just finish this point about involvement?
Okay, because I want to address.
We have a policy that any citizen in the area can come in our building during the academic day, as long as they stopped in the office, didn't have a weapon on them, and didn't interrupt instruction.
When was that?
That was up until MGT.
5, 6 years ago. I don't know that that's the world we live in.
Well, I'm not saying it is the world we live in, but I'm just saying that if citizens are locked out of the buildings and there's no transparency and parents can't come into the building with just a valid reason, and I don't know. This is secondhand information.
Okay.
I'll be as transparent as I can.
Okay. So it's secondhand.
But I'm just saying that the parents and citizens have brought this, and it has been said in the presence of MGT. So it's nothing.
I don't want to get off track here, but I don't want to turn this into a challenge either, but back to the engagement. I feel like I can be engaged if I want to be, at any level that I want to be engaged.
If you're permitted to, if you're being thrown off the campus by security.
Well,
then
if I'm showing up at my school system and I'm not doing it the appropriate way based on school policy, they will throw West Winter off.
Okay, yeah, I'm saying, they, so if you come in there disrupting, it's.
No, it's not even disruption. If I'm trying to get in door number 3, I should be going into
Oh,
door.
well, that's technical, that's not the issue. You know,
Okay.
you're watering it down.
I'm not trying to conflate it. I'm not trying to conflate either.
Yeah, you're watering it down considerably.
I do want to pivot back to the conversation about how we proceed. I think it's important to go to Gary. I think it's important to hold a public meeting in Gary, and I think I would think about that in a couple ways. I think one, we need to hear from MGT about a proposal of how to proceed, how they would proceed over the next 2 years. What does that look like? What would they propose doing? What does the engagement look like for them? And then I think there's also an opportunity then for us to solicit feedback from the community, hear their input, and I'll say this again, I think the input that is most effective and most important is, what do we prioritize in the future? What should MGT or whoever sits in that chair be focused on in the next 2 years? And how can we best move this district in the next 2 years from where it is to an effective transition? So the other thing I would offer in that moment is, and we have talked about this as well, which is allowing people to provide feedback to us ahead of time through the website. And I think we have the ability to place a sort of a survey up where people can provide feedback to us on specific topics, and then also invite written questions that we could, I don't think we would present all the questions, there's just not time to do that, but review some of those questions and present some of those to MGT, and invite their response to the community's questions about how they would propose to move forward.
Jim, I have a question. Actually, to do this and for it to be really effective, I think we're going to need your help in getting this information to the parents, because they're the ones that are really the most important in this. And so to get the word out, saying, we're going to be there if you have questions, please attend. But just to make sure that we try to go through every avenue, that you put it on Facebook, do all it reach as many parents as we can, and we welcome them. We want them to come. We want to hear what they have to say. So that would be a great help, I think, to us if that was taken care of your end, so we know that the word's been out and we're giving them the opportunity and welcome them.
Right. Any other comments regarding this topic? Obviously, it's a topic that will come back another time. Is there any new business for the board today?
Very quickly, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I want to thank Dr. McNulty for bringing this to me. This is, I'm certainly willing and want to make a donation to the appropriate place to make a donation, but this brick was brought to me at my request for an alumni of Blue Wallace. So this will not be going to me, but I will make the donation on that person's behalf and we'll be presenting it to alumni of Blue Wallace. I think who they may be going up there. You have an event, if I'm not mistaken.
Thursday.
Correct. So I'm not sure if that person will be making it, but if they are not able to, I will be presenting that brick. Otherwise, I'm going to give it to you.
I think they may want, I think you're giving that, but they may not want to finish.
Well, sure, and that's, I was not aware, but I would certainly make a donation on their behalf.
It was my intention, I laid it on my steps to bring to this meeting to show you the finish.
Sounds like
very
nice. Very nice thing, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. All right, well, with that, we are adjourned.